Sidewalks. What is the craziest sidewalk that you've ever been on? Is it this one? Is it this one? Or is it this one? So I'll put it in the comments below. Yeah, these intros are getting more and more interesting as time goes on, right? Creepy sidewalks. Anyways, without further ado, let's just grab a blanket, turn off your lights for four true scary horror stories that happened, yeah, as you're walking on the side. The time some douchebag tried to follow me home in a blizzard. I posted this here about a year ago, but deleted it pretty quickly because for some stupid reason, I was worried that the guy would find out who I was through my Reddit account. However, I now live in a different state and I'm not worried about that, so I'm putting it back out there. For 6 years, I lived in a mid-sized city for college. I'd always heard bad things about this city, but it didn't bother me and I never really had any issues. Last year, we had a huge blizzard, and it was just starting up on a Friday. I decided to head to the drugstore for some beer and snacks before it got really bad. The walk to the store was only a few blocks, and I had to pass a coffee shop that I worked at in a recent past. I headed around 2 p.m. and while I'm in line, I notice a tall man who looked to be in his mid-20s. 2 people ahead of me that keeps looking back at me. I do the polite thing and smile when I make eye contact, but my smile is not returned. Instead, it is met with a look of hatred. He gives me a bad feeling, and I just hope that because he's ahead of me in line, he'll be gone by the time I get outside. Just a side note, at the time, I was working as a security guard and had been for 5 years or so. I've been on my own for a long time, and I can handle my own. I'm also a pretty large girl at 5'10" and solid build. I've had to become observant by necessity, and I always listen to my gut, so I was on high alert when I left the store. At the store, when you exit, you either walk left to the parking lot or walk right to the sidewalk. As soon as I get out of the doors, I notice this friggin' guy standing in the first parking space to the left, facing the doors. I walk to the right and onto the sidewalk, watching him out of the corner of my eye, and he starts to follow me. There were an unusual number of people out. Lots of homeless people that would hang out at the bus stop near the drugstore, so I didn't feel particularly vulnerable. Every block or so, I would look behind me to see if he was still there, which he was. Finally, after the 3rd time, I book it. The snow was starting to pile up, and up, and up, until this time, I didn't know how hard it was to run in fresh snow, so I probably looked like a dumbass running from some dude in slow motion. Luckily, the coffee shop I used to work at was on the same side of the road, so I run in there. I'm not showing this guy where I live, huffing and puffing, and tell them some asshole is following me. I sit down, and we all watch him walk past the front window, peering inside. I thought maybe he would keep going. Wrong. He walks back the way he comes, still looking for me inside. This pretty much solidified that he was following me, and I figured he would just circle the shop until I came out. Once I caught my breath, I got mad. I stormed out the doors to confront this guy, but he's gone. I waited at the shop for a little while longer, and then crossed the street to go home, still looking over my shoulder. I called their non-emergency police number to report the incident, but doubt anything came of it. I hope this guy isn't still out there, trying to follow girls home in broad fucking daylight. Fucking creep. The scariest night of my life, and theirs too. Hello all. My friend keeps track of this board regularly and sends me links to the stories. He encouraged me to submit my own too, because I told it to him a while back and he thinks it's worth submitting. So here goes. My story takes place in my home country, where people are more likely to believe in the paranormal. I was around 18 years old when this happened. I was at home. It was late at night, around 11 p.m. got into a fight with my boyfriend, as teens tend to do. And naturally, it got overdramatic. They were yelling on phones, tearful confessions. When I put the phone down, I got an idea in my head. It's the stupidest thing I've ever done. I decided to walk to his house and confront him face to face. He and I only live 15 minutes apart if you walk. However, we're separated by roads that are very dimly lit. If you drive past, you'll never see anyone on the sidewalk. People just don't walk there at night, because it's dark as hell. You basically live in a part of town consisting of gated communities, and I was going to walk from mine to his. So, I put on a sweater, some shorts, and sneakers. My appearance plays a big part in this, because I have a very stereotypically Asian doll look. Bangs, long straight dark hair, rather pale skin and everything. I'm a short girl, only 5 feet tall. Until now, I could look 12 if I really wanted to. Basically, I'm the last person in the world who will look threatening, and that's not good for me. But that night, I was angry. Deep down, I knew walking there was friggin' dangerous, but I wouldn't listen to the alarm bells in my brain. I set off, walking at a brisk pace. It was dark. There was no one on the street. I was completely alone and very pissed. So pissed that I suddenly got a nosebleed. Already, I've been tearing up from the drama, and that had to happen. I get nosebleeds when I'm stressed, so out of nowhere, blood gushed from my nose and splattered all over my clothes. It was like a running faucet. And I stabbed it off a bit with my hands, so my hands got bloody too. My face was tear-streaked and blood-stained. I looked like a mess. Nevertheless, I was too pissed to stop or turn around or even care. I kept walking, even more pissed now that my clothes were ruined. In my head, I looked like an idiot. And then I saw them. I froze. I just crossed the street. The sidewalk had a wall to the left, because there was another gated community. To the right was the road. I saw figures moving, men, around 4 or 5. It was so dark I could not see their faces, but there was a ladder leaning against the wall. One of them was on it. They'd been talking, and I could see the glints of tools hanging from their belts. Saw, hammer. At first, I thought they were repairmen, since it's normal around here for public repairs to be done late at night, so it doesn't get in the way of people in the morning. But still, like any girl, I went from angry to terrified. A gang of men in a secluded area never bodes well for any person. I was going to turn around and flee in the other direction, but too late. Before I could leave unnoticed, they'd seen me, because they all turned their heads towards me at the same time. For a very brief moment, we all just stared at each other. It went by so fast that I didn't even have the chance to look scared. My expression was still blank. Just when I was about to flee, one of them yelled and I was caught in my tracks. But it wasn't an angry yell. It was a high-pitched, trembling ah that trailed off into nothing. The rest of the men started cursing, and they scrambled. I was shaking. I thought they were going to run for me, but they were actually scared shitless. I realized this when they all ran for their car, parked right beside the sidewalk, leaving their ladder behind. They were still cursing, telling each other to hurry up, as the car did the fastest, most impressive U-turn I've ever seen my whole entire life, and they drove off in the other direction. I realized that, looking like a bloody China doll, they must have thought I was a ghost. I almost started laughing then and there, but I too was freaked by the experience. I hightailed it to my boyfriend's house. Only around a week later did I find out in the papers that there had been a string of robberies around our area. The robbers would bring a ladder, lean it against the wall, and use it to get to houses that were located on the very border of the subdivision. Police actually found out their plans because they found a ladder they left behind, aka what happened during my night. One recent robbery had led to a maid being killed by the thieves. Until now, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten that nosebleed. Guys from the Purge. Being on the sub and reading these stories reminded me of my own, and I thought I'd share. Last year, right around the weekend of Halloween, October 28th, I was late to show up to a friend's Halloween party. I had a supper to go to right before completely across town. When I left, it was about 10 p.m., and I had an hour drive ahead of me. But if I took a shortcut into a not-so-safe part of town, I would save 25 minutes. Big mistake. As I'm waiting at a red light in the sketchiest part of town, I look over to the sidewalk and I see 3 men, dressed up as the purge, heading towards my vehicle. I look around me and I see that there are no other cars nor pedestrians. These guys start coming over to me faster now, all of them carrying weapons. One had a baseball bat, one had a crowbar, and one had an axe. Whether they were just playing a Halloween prank or not, it was still the scariest experience of my life. Especially because right before the light turned green, they approached my window, and one of them even tried pulling on my passenger side handle before I peeled away. Prank or not, guys from the purge, let's not meet again. I look like a dead baby. The first time she spoke to me, it was to tell me that I looked like her stillborn daughter. Several years ago, I was a freshman in college in a small Midwest town, and I just got a job working one of those kiosks in the mall, the type that people attempt to walk by without being noticed. It was boring as hell, but it was all I could get. Due to my class schedule, I had a pretty set routine that my boss let me work around. I opened every Tuesday and Thursday, and usually closed on the weekends. It was the morning shifts that started it all. At first, I thought it was a pretty sweet gig. Be at the mall by 9 to get things set up, then I could study or read until things started to pick up. Usually, it was just the older couples that time of morning who would power walk laps around the mall. Over the weeks, I started recognizing the same people. I realized there was always this one woman, 60s, short and kinda overweight. She wasn't power walking like the others, but just shuffled around the mall. I usually saw her go past me a couple times each morning. Never said anything outright, but she'd mumble to herself and take quick glances at me before moving on. I didn't think much of it. This continued for a while. Shuffle, mumble, a few looks, and moved on. Then one morning, I was sitting on my stool, and I heard a voice much too close behind me say, "You look like her." I flipped around and saw this woman not 2 feet behind me. I was startled but tried to be polite, so I asked who she meant. "My daughter." This woman didn't seem too crazy anymore. She actually looked kinda annoyed at me. I asked what her daughter's name was, and she replied that her daughter didn't have a name, that she had been stillborn. She said the dead didn't have names. They didn't get to have names. Then she asked what my name was. At this point, I was starting to freak out. This woman was staring straight in my eyes as if she was trying to see through me. I really had no response at all. What do you say to a slightly demented old woman who says you remind her of a dead baby? I didn't tell her my name either. Didn't feel right. So I kind of just laughed nervously and put some space between us. She stared for a few seconds more. Then she grunted at me. Yes, she grunted, and shuffled off. I was creeped out the rest of the day, and always kept looking over my shoulder from time to time. So, by the end of the night, I wrote it off as a lonely old woman with no social skills and tried to forget it. My next morning shift, I saw her crouch behind a garbage can glaring at me. I don't know how long she had been there, but she was just staring. I did my best to ignore her. This lasted a few minutes before she continued her normal shuffle and mumble routine. She didn't speak again until a couple weeks later. This time, I saw her approaching me and braced myself for more weirdness. I fully expected another dead daughter comment, and she actually said nothing though. Just walked right up to me, stared into my eyes and said nothing. I said, can I help you with something? This time, she didn't seem annoyed with me. She actually seemed, how dare her, she actually seemed angry. "You look like her. You shouldn't look like her. The deads don't gain names, but you do." Then she shuffled off before I could say a thing. A few days later, she asked if I knew her daughter. Couple days after that, she asked me why I lived and her daughter didn't. She made no sense whatsoever. I was getting angry instead of just uneasy. She'd been staring at me, sometimes crouched around garbage cans to do so, and saying weird things to me for weeks now. So I'd said something I shouldn't have. I wasn't the smartest person back then. I basically told her I didn't know her, didn't want to know her, and sure as hell didn't want to hear about her dead kid anymore. I felt bad for saying it, but I was getting pissed off. She was freaking me out, and I thought if I stood up for myself that she would just leave me alone. And she did for a few days. But then, I started seeing her on my closing shifts on the weekends. Up until now, I had only seen her in the mornings. She didn't come up to me anymore, maybe because it was busier in the mall that time of day, but she took to sitting on a bench not too far away from me, and staring at me while mumbling to herself. She also seemed different. Before, she always seemed half lost, a little slow physically, and just unsure of herself. Now, she seemed very clear-headed and determined. She also shuffled faster than before. She even sat on that bench with more purpose, almost like focusing on me had given her new energy. I should have gone to my boss well before now, but I honestly thought she was just a weirdo, and she wasn't approaching me or talking about her daughter anymore, so I thought I'd taken care of it. Then, on one afternoon, as I was leaving the mall, I had just gone into my car when I noticed she was standing on the sidewalk entrance I had just left, and she was staring right at me in my car. This time, I started to get genuinely scared. I hadn't seen her at all that day, so I'm not sure if she had been watching me the whole time or not. I sped out of there, checking the rearview mirror to make sure she hadn't sprouted wings and a forked tongue to chase after me. This is where I mentioned the detail that makes me truly stupid. The lock on my car had been sticking lately, and didn't always lock right. I've been meaning to get it looked at, but I was a poor college student and a procrastinator. Plus, it was a piece of junk car anyways, and nothing worth stealing inside, so I didn't get the locks fixed. Even knowing there was this crazy old woman keeping tabs on me at work, worst mistake of my life. I know! Believe me. I know. I didn't see her for a few shifts after that. I even checked around the parking lot before going to my car. Nothing. So, I started to write her off again. Then came the day everything changed. I hadn't seen her in the mall. Didn't see her in the parking lot, so I got in my car and started to drive off. I didn't even realize she was in my back seat for a few minutes, because she wasn't saying anything. She must have crawled in at some point during the day and hidden on the floor. All I knew was that I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her sitting calmly in the back seat, staring at me through the mirror. I yelled. The car swerved, not sure how I managed to stay on the road. I was terrified and angry all at once. I asked what the hell she was doing in my car, and she said she wanted to introduce me to her daughter. I reminded her that her daughter was dead, and she said, "I know." I should have just stopped the car and ran for it, but she grabbed my elbow with a surprisingly strong grip for her age and told me to keep driving. I asked where she wanted me to drive to, but she didn't answer for a while. I avoided my neighborhood altogether. I thought about driving to the police station, the department, or even fire department, but I didn't know where they were. My phone was in my purse, which I'd thrown in the passenger seat, and couldn't reach it with her dead grip on my right arm. She started mumbling that her daughter was a little ways away, and she wanted me to take us to her. "You need to meet her. My daughter, your daughter died when she was a baby. You look alike." There was no weapon, no direct threat. So I kept driving. She started giving me very specific directions to a street address I did not recognize. I followed those directions for maybe 10 minutes, trying to think of a solid game plan before she told me to pull over. I realized we were outside a cemetery, not one of those run-down horror movie cemeteries, but a well-cut one. The flowers and fresh grass didn't make it any more welcoming. This is the closest I came to shitting my pants. I was crying at this point and thought maybe she was planning some murder-suicide thing, or is going to sacrifice me over her kid's grave. I don't know. She was smiling now through the rearview mirror. She looked kinder when she was glaring. She started tugging on my elbow and pointing into the graveyard, saying I had to come with her. I asked her why. If she had lived, she would be you. Come see her, so she can be you. I got out of the car and so did she. She grabbed my hand and started pulling me towards the headstones. I broke away, dove in the car, and peeled out of there before she could grab me again. I saw her standing on the curb staring after me, and she looked angry. I never went back to the mall, called my boss after that, explained what had been going on, and that I quit. He understood, but said I should have said something a long time ago. Honestly, he probably thought I was making up the most lame excuse for quitting ever. I realized this all sounds crazy, and I did call the police after I got home, but to my knowledge, they never found her. I never saw her again. Looking back, I see she was mentally ill. Sometimes I feel bad for her. Mostly I just make sure to lock my doors from now on.